Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Stephen.
How are you, Marv?
Good. How are you this morning?
Thank good. Thank
Good.
goodness. Nina and I are planning to fly down to Century Village on Tuesday.
Oh, good. That's nice, finally.
Yeah, we'll be there for a couple of weeks.
Good.
How are things?
Quiet. Thank God.
Yeah. What building are you in?
I beg your pardon?
What building are you in?
In Yarmouth D.
D?
D is in David, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
What's happening? What's happening? She's late, huh?
It's Thursday.
Oh,
You can be up to 15 minutes late.
yeah, what's going on? Maybe no power again.
No. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, I hear you now.
Yeah.
Okay, we're just running a little bit late this morning. All right, we had a tikkun here in Shul, so.
Oh.
And it was from one of the guys that do the daf. So listen, we gotta go,
Very nice.
Steve, we'll have to make a l'chaim virtually.
Right. Well, okay, we'll run through the sponsors and then we'll get going, right? Hey, that'll give a chance for the other guys to get inside. Year of Learning by Sue and Arnie Garlick, in memory of Malcolm Perlman and Philip Mann, Yisrael David ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch, Beryl ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch, Yosef Meir ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch, Henya Rivka Pro Rosna Bas Arav Tzvi Hirsch, in a memory of family murdered in the Holocaust. Arav Tzvi Hirsch ben Shlomo Yaakov, Sarah bat Ephraim, Yisrael David ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch, Ephraim ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch, Adia bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Miriam bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Pesel bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shalom ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shlomo Yaakov ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shmuel ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch. Shall share her children and grandchildren in memory of her uncle, founding member of BRS, Dr. Israel Brook, Israel ben Harav Akiva, Marcia Federbush and family in memory of her husband, Dr. Uriel Paul Federbush, Uriel Pinchas ben Harav Shimon, Sharon and Fred Liska, their family and many friends, in memory of her dear mom, Harriet Friedman, Edelbas Yaakov, Leslie and Gail Kaplan, in memory of their parents, Harry and Marjorie Sedell, Irving and Pearl Kaplan, friends of Avi Meir ben Shimon, and Martha Gitler, Sharna bat Yeshaya, children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren of Toby Paris. Sid wasn't here this morning again either. He told me why yesterday. Sarah Tova bat Yisrael Dov in her memory. Friends of Malka Levi, Malka bat Yosef. Friends of Joe Wolf, Yosef ben Chaim. Charlie Gelfenstein and Sam Levine. In memory of Ramona Levine, Rachel Mata bat Asher. Month of Learning by David and Mendel Cheslow. In memory of his mother, Bela Bas Meir. Marcia Federbush, in memory of her husband, Oriel Pinchas ben Arav Shimon. Gary and Marcia Schrager, in memory of his father, David ben Yosef, and his mother, Freda Bas Hendel. Bill Bloodlander, in memory of his parents, Tzvi ben Yaakov Yitzchak, and Bela Drasha Bas Arav Dov Beir. And his in-laws, Yehuda Tzvi ben David Nachum, and Alta Chaya Bas Avram Yosef. A week of learning by Vicky Rubinovich Fish and Larry Fish, in memory of her father, Chaim Zusia ben Shlomo ben Zion, and her mother, Ita Bat Tzvi. Michael and Judy Poretsky, in memory of his father, Gershon ben Chaim Tzvi. A day of learning plus Torah fun today by Judy Iger, in memory of her son, Yerachmiel ben Aharon. Also today, a day of learning by Walter and Sippi Fried in memory of his brother Aryeh ben Avram. May the Neshamas heaven aliyah, crank Rafia, Vel Yeshir Shama Tliya, and L'chol B'nai Yisrael a good Gebenshkia.
Hey,
Okay, Steve is on. Harvey, we don't know yet. Okay, let's go to basically the Mem Gimel Amud Aleph today, right? We have Irenu Arba Amod Rishut Rabim. Okay, we said basically that was the second aspect of the reason that they did not permit someone to carry a lulav, the same way they did not permit them to carry shofar or carry Megillat Esther. Okay, shofar more, lulav more so, because we said not only were they concerned that they carry Arba Amos in the public domain, but maybe they would bring it, that would result in, because they were going to bring it to an expert to learn how to do something with it. Probably not Nuim, given the various different minhagim that people have. Okay? Hainu Tamid the shofar is what we just said. It's part of our transition. That was the basic reason for the shofar. Hainu Tamid the Megillah, and that was the reasoning of the Megillah. Right? So all we were doing was the review, Bob. Okay, and just transition. Okay. Ihachi, says the Gemara, Yom Rishon Nami. And that's where we stopped, basically. If that's the case, then shouldn't we forbid it on the first day as well? Okay. Now, as we continue, we're going to see there's a lot of back and forth, a lot of, I would call, shachvitaria, but I want to use the word dialogue, okay? Because shachvitaria normally gives you in a sense of argument back and forth, okay? Which there is here, but the dialogue back and forth sometimes can get a little bit confusing, okay? So what happens? Okay, so we just suggested that we should forbid if the first day of Sukkot is also, Shabbos, maybe for those same reasons we should forbid carrying the lulav. That's where we're starting now in the new material. Rishon, hatakinu le rabbanan beveito. But the argument, says the Gemara, is here. We've already seen the rabbi, so to speak, reacted to the whole situation of the tossing the lulavim and all of that by saying at this point, people would do it at home, right? So the Gemara comes back. Atenach achar takana. That's fine after the rabbis made that decree. Kodim takana mai ikalamema. But before the rabbis made the decree, what are you going to say? What about then? Ella says rather Rishon. So now we're going to give it an attempt, right? Ella is telling us, okay, I'm going to try to come up with an alternative answer. Okay? Ella rather Rishon the ite min haTorah bigvuli. Why? Well, we could argue maybe because on the first day, it's still required deoraita to take lulav and esrog, even in the environs, and not just in the Beis Hamikdash. Okay, and therefore logos ruba hen rabbanan, and that was the reason the rabbis didn't make the decree earlier. Okay, hinach delit naho min haTorah bigvulim. That's satisfactory. In other words, these other days, for example, that they didn't make the decree because it was a Torah, the Oraita mandated, right? In the environs. Gazru baho Rabbanan. Okay, maybe that's the reason they didn't make their decree then. Ihachi, if that's the case, right? Ha'idna, nami. If that's the case, what about today? Maybe we should say today, Therefore, also, we should be able to do it on the first day. Okay, so the answer is Anan lo yad'inen bekivua diyach. We don't know for sure the exactitude, I'm going to use that word, of fixing the new month. In other words, we're not sure if the exact date. That's why in the diaspora we have 2 days, right? Because we don't know, did the yontif start on this day? Does it start on this day? If it really starts, just as an aside point, on this, what we would call the second day, okay, then that would be the day that you would, okay, and maybe then it wouldn't be done on Shabbat, right? Because if the first day was Shabbos and the second day is Sunday, and that really in the diaspora, that's really the second day, but really it's the first day, then the implication is, no, there's no reason for them to have to carry it on Shabbat still. So that's the answer. Okay. Now, what's the matter? What's the point? What's the argument against that view? Fine, that may work if you're in the diaspora, but that doesn't answer the question if you live in Eretz Yisrael. Okay, and so the Gemara is going to have to bring up that issue. So so what happens? Anam lo yadinan bekivua diyarcha. We said we don't know the exact date of fixing the new month. Inhu, but they, in other words, Eretz Yisrael, diyade bekivua diyarcha, that they know the exact date of fixing the month. Lidchu, let it override the Shabbat. Okay, that's the point. The implication seems to be here. Lulav is the oraita, tiltu, right? Carrying is the rabbanan. Therefore, let it override that the rabbanan. Okay, and the Gemara responds, "Ein hachinami." Indeed, that's the case, right? The Tane. Why? Because we have one Braita, the Tani Chada, that taught, one Braita taught, Biyom Tov Harishon, Shechag, right? First day of the Sukkot holiday, Shechaliot b'Shabbat, when it occurs on Shabbat, Kol Ha'am Molichin et Lulavehen Lahar Habayit. So one Braita taught, as we learned earlier, actually this was the second Braita. This is a mission. Okay, that you bring it to the Har Habayit. V'tanya idach, and another one taught, okay, the Beit HaKnesset, right? And the earlier that we did a couple days ago said, no, they bring it to the local shul. Shema Mina, from here we learn, Kan Bizman Shebeit HaMikdash Kayam, Kan Bizman She'ein Beit HaMikdash Kayam, Shema Mina. Okay. So that would be a way of saying one of the texts refers to when the temple was in existence, another when it was not. Okay, so that was one attempt to deal with how do you have the two different texts not contradict each other, number one. And number two, how do you also deal with the whole question of why we don't carry the lulav on first day when it's Shabbos, first day of Sukkot when it's Shabbos. Okay, having said that, all right, now we come back and we ask the following question. De'ite min haTorah b'gvuli. We said as part of the earlier argument, okay, that it was a Torah mandated practice in the environs, right? Minala, what's the basis of this? Asks the Gemara. The Tanya, as taught now. Ulekachtem, it says that you should take it, right? Shetehei lekicha biad kol echad ve'echad. That each person, right, should take their lulav. Lachem, for you, that it has to be yours. I'm translating it. Lahotziat yisha'u v'yat hagazul, to exclude, right, that which is borrowed or stolen. Bayom, on that day, va'afilu b'Shabbat, even that day, even if it is a Shabbos.
Rishon.
Okay, afilu b'Gvulin, right? So how they get from Rishon to the Gvulin, we're going to have mentally, we're going to have to wait and see, does the Gemara present how they darshan that? Okay, what does it mean first? Well, I would have normally thought that first meant was the first place that's most important, namely in the Beis Hamikdash. And therefore I could justify that on Shabbat in the Beis Hamikdash, that would be the case. But I still can't see how that connects me to the environs. We have to see, does the Gemara darshan that? Okay, right? So what happens? Afilu bigvulin, even in the environs. So in other words, it may have been, yes, clearly to be required in the Beis Hamikdash, but that doesn't mean that's the only place to be done. Okay. Harishon milamed she'eno doche et ela yom tov harishon bilvad. So see, there's a difference here. Harishon, when you add the hey hayidiyah, the definitive article, that particular first day, that tells us, it says that there, only that's the day in which Shabbat is overridden, if that coincide, right? Bilvad. Now, Amar Mar, he says as follows: Biyom va'afilu b'Shabbat. So he darshans it a little differently.
Right.
On the day means including Shabbat. Michdei tiltu ba'almahu. Since we say that that's carrying in general, it's tarich kra lemishrei tiltu. Do we need, is it necessary to have a pasuk to tell us that you're going to be permitted to carry on that, the lulav on that occasion, on that first day? Amar Rabba, says Rabba, lo nitzracha ela lemachshirei lulav. No, Rava's explanation is that we need the pasuk in order to arrange for whatever preparations, advanced preparations. Say I have to cut the branches off the tree. Can I do that, therefore? The implication from Rava would be yes. All right, because that would be machshire, preparation for the lulav. Okay. Aliba dahaitan. And that was according to the following Tana, right? The Tanya, who taught as follows: Lulav v'chol machshirav dochin et haShabbat divrei Rabbi Eliezer. Okay? So Rabbi Eliezer held that that was the case, right? Now, so the Gemara asks, and very reasonable, my Tama de Rabbi Eliezer, what was his reasoning? Okay. Amar Kra, he would cite a pasuk, Biyom va'afilu b'Shabbat, on the day, in other words, including, even if it is Shabbat. V'Rabbanan, but then how did the rabbis handle that? Okay. Hi Biyom, Ma'i Avde B'lei. So what did the rabbis do then with that word Bayom? Right? Mibayile bayom velo balayla. They required it. Why? To be able to say that you utilize the lulav and esrog only during daytime and not at night. Now, before
to
we
be sure, the idea of facilitators makes some sense because you're able to cut packages and tear things open to get food for Shabbos. Certainly, cutting a branch for the lulav would be the same type of thing.
I'll give you a different example. Okay, my example is going to be maybe if I have two mitzvot that are important on Sukkot, one dwelling in the sukkah and one arba minim. Maybe I could argue I have to learn how to handle the arba minim based on sukkah. If I have a requirement to dwell in the sukkah both day and night, maybe therefore I have a requirement for arba minim both day and night. Okay, and we're going to see which explanation, if the Gemara follows that line of thinking. Okay, so what happens? What do the rabbis then do with bayom? Asks the Gemara. Mibayale bayom uvelo balayla. That they said they requires it today and not at night. V'Rebbe Eliezer bayom velo balayla minale. So if that's the question, what does Rabbi Eliezer get? How does he derive the idea that you only use arba minim and not night? All right? Nafkale me sefer the learns it from the end of the pasuk, where it says, "V'samachtem lefnei Hashem Elokeichem shivat yamim," that you shall rejoice before Hashem your God 7 days. That tells me days and not nights. Now, v'Rabbanan.
Yeah, what did he do with that?
Okay. What about the rabbis again? Imihatem hava amina leilef yamim misukah. But if that was the case, I'm suggesting the Gemara can be understood. I could have said maybe the rabbis would have learned it as a gzera shava from the word days associated with the mitzvah of sukkah, right? Malahalan yamim va'afilu leilot. But the Gemara then tells us, wait a second, whereas there you have days and also including night, afkan nami yamim va'afilu leilot. Then I would have to apply that same logic to the mitzvah arba minim and say, therefore, there too, maybe I should be able to, or do arba minim both days and at nights, right? V'sukkah gufa minalan. But wait a second, says the Gemara. Sukkah itself, I have an issue. If my pasuk just says, v'samachtem, etc., right? And then it ends with the word yamim, shivat yamim. On what basis then do I have to observe sukkah at night? Right? The Tanu Rabbanan. Excuse me, Basukot teshvu shivat yamim. There's my pasuk, right? It says dwell in the sukkah 7 days. Yamim va'afilu leilot. That means days and including nights. Ata omer yamim va'afilu leilot. Do you say it means days and in even nights? O eino el yamim v'lo leilot. Or do I understand that to mean day and not inclusive of nights? Vidinhu. And this seems logical. Ne'amar kan yamim. It says here days. V'ne'amar belulav yamim. Because also with lulav, it says days. Malahalan yamim v'lo leilot. Afkan yamim v'lo leilot. Based on that gezerah shava of the word yamim, I could therefore argue, right? Days tells me if sukkahs could be days only, arba minim should be days only, right? Oh, or, says the Gemara, kelech lederech zo, or you could go in an alternative direction. In other words, you can explain it the following, reason this way, right? Ne'emar kan yamim. It says here days. But ne'emar b'melu'im yamim. And it says in regards to the melu'im, the inauguration of the Mishkan. There too it says days. Malahalan yamim va'afilu leilot. Whereas there in the Mishkan, right? It included days and nights. Afkan yamim va'afilu leilot. So here too, for sukkah, I could say, excuse me, it applies to days and even nights. Nir'eh lemi domeh. And now we're going to say, using this is not a common expression, I think, in the Gemara. Let's see to which of these it applies. Okay, are we comparing arba meaning to sukkah, or are we comparing it to melu'im? That's the question that the Gemara wants us to focus on, right? Danin davar shemitzvato kol hayom midavar shemitzvato kol hayom. We make our determination, okay, from something where the mitzvah was the entire day, from something else where the mitzvah was the entire day. Va'al yochiach davar shemitzvato sha'a achat. But we can't prove it from something where the mitzvah was only, let's say, a single hour, a moment. Okay. Or perhaps, kelech l'derech zo. We might reason in the following direction. Danin davar shemitzvato l'dorot midavar shemitzvato l'dorot. We'll determine it, right, from something where the mitzvah continues for generations. In other words, it's ongoing, from something else where the mitzvah is ongoing. Va'al yochichu melu'im she'eino heget l'dorot. And therefore, and we cannot make it proof from the example of the inauguration of the Mishkan, because that is not something that continued for generations, right? So the Gemara picks up and tells us as we go on to the next Talmud Lomar. What does the text teach us? Teishvu, you should sit or dwell. Teishvu. Also, we have again Teishvu. So again, we're going to try using a Gzeira Shava, right? The Gzeira Shava. Let's use that then. Ne'emar kan Teishvu. It uses the term Teishvu with regards to the sukkah. V'ne'emar b'melu'im Teishvu. And we also have the word Teishvu in regards to the Mishkan as well. I'm not citing the pasuk, but Art Scroll tells us it's right. There's a phrase, right? Okay. Malahalan yamim va'afilu leilot, afkan yamim va'afilu leilot. Therefore, that's the comparison, is that we learn from the that it's both day and night, and if that's the case, we cannot use sukkah as the comparison for lulav and arba meaning. Right? Okay. Now, having discussed that, the Gemara wants to go back and get us back to another aspect. Right? Remember we said earlier that lavos were used for two purposes. Purpose number one was part of arba meaning, and purpose number two was as part of a ceremony involved in the Beis Hamikdash. Okay, since we weren't all there at the time, okay, we can't be sure what they did. Well, interestingly enough, we're going to see the Amoraim also weren't there at the same time. So that's their same problem. What was done? Was it that they walked around the Mizbeach? Did they put the willows standing up against the Mizbeach? What was done for sure? And there's a difference of opinion, okay? So it's important, I think, for us now as we go into this Gemara to see this, understand that that was the case. Arava Shiv'a Ketzad. How would it be, okay, in this case, we're asking about the using of the willow, of the Aravot, in the Beis Hamikdash. Arava b'shvi'i mai tama. Dehi Shabbat, Dachia Shabbat. I'm sorry. Okay, so our question, first thing is, if you say that you use it in the base of Mikdash 7 days, okay, is on what basis do we say then that this practice overrides Shabbos? Okay, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Kedei lefarsama shehi min haTorah. According to Rabbi Yochanan, arguing that it's in order to publicize that it's a Torah mandated observance, mitzvah, right? Ihachi. If that's the case, says the Gemara, and notice the logic here, okay? Nami lulav, nami lidchei, lefasamo shehu min haTorah. If you say that that's good for the hadassim, well, what about the lulav? Wouldn't that also then be good for Shabbos as well? Right? Because we could argue a few things. We could argue, remember, we say the bracha, and in the bracha, it clearly emphasizes the lulav. We could argue back again because it was the tallest, all of these things. Okay? So the Gemara now tells us, lulav gzera mishum derabba. Lulav, we don't say it's doche Shabbos because of the rationale that Rava gave. Remember, Rava was the one who said, perhaps somebody will go to an expert to learn it and therefore carry it in public domain, our Daled Amos. Okay? Ihachi, if that's the case, Arava nami nigzi, then maybe for the Arava we should also make a decree. Arava, shluchei beit din maitela. Lulav lechol musa masur. What's the difference? Why didn't they make a prohibition then about carrying the hadassim? Okay, the aravos. I'm sorry. Why? Because they're saying that representatives of the court who would be careful as to how, in other words, they would prepare it in advance, and who would be careful, they were the ones who would bring it and have it ready in the temple. You don't like that argument earlier.
This is my big complaint against the Gemara. Kohanim is reasonable mitzvah, and then they got pig oil and everything. Either they are or they aren't.
No, that's going to be the most fun, because their relatives are run by the Kohanim.
Yeah.
The Kohanim didn't have to worry. They're going to be the Kohanim that they're going to do.
Yeah, they keep screwing it up.
Okay. My only, it's a good point, too. My only point is, remember, throughout a lot of this, we know that there were different minhagim in the Beis Hamikdash, in the area of the temple, than outside. Okay, clearly, all right? And that, because the one example is that we know that many of the Durabanan did not apply in the area of the Beis Hamikdash. That's the only answer I can give you.
I would offer another answer.
Okay, good.
Not a Kohen, that's why I
No,
look like this.
Hegel, if the woman knows that the person was bringing a korban not properly, so the Baruch would put the machshava people in the Kohen's mind so that the korban wouldn't be valid. So this way to prevent.
Okay, interesting.
Also, I
mean, it's Kohanim is the reason, and the reason this happened was because the Baruch didn't want the bonus to be brought improperly. So
also remember learning it, all these going with pickles, notes, and everything else. It does
Right.
give me the full theoretical, because one time they said if he checks outside using a 10-foot long knife. I mean, there's some of the cases I know ridiculous.
Right.
But the Gemara was just talking about if this happened, if that happened, and that's saying that this was it, that the Gemara were a bunch of bumpkins. They knew what they were doing. We're just saying if he happened to it this way, what would be the whole offer?
Okay, but so notice the difference is, so you had, let's say, I'll phrase it a little different. You had supervision, appropriate supervision in handling the aravos in the Beis Hamikdash. But lulav, since it was given to everybody, says the Gemara, you're not sure how careful people are going to be in regards to handling the lulav on Shabbat. Okay? And then we can take the Kohanim out of the picture for the moment. All right? Okay. Ihachi, if that's the case, okay? Ate lepikpuke belulav velidche biyom tov rishon. Okay? So what happens? He's arguing here, right? The following. If that's the case, right, then we might argue every day of the holiday, any day, okay, could be such. If it was Shabbat, you had to make it not just the first day, but if any one of the days of the 7 days of the holiday is Shabbat, it should be doche in that situation, right? That's his argument, right? Nami litche lefarsim, right? Okay, ate lepukpake belulav, all right? Because why then the lulav override only 1 day and the willow allow 7 days? Okay, that's how another Koran phrases it. Okay, so what happens? All right, he says as follows: "V'lidche biyom tov rishon," that it only overrides the first day. Lo muchacha milta. Okay, so we're not saying that this isn't adequate proof then. Okay, because we could assume that the mitzvah of lulav overrides Shabbat, and the willow is going to be along with it, right? Amre, because we say, lulav hu dekadache. Let the lulav be what overrides Shabbat, right? Velidche bechad mehanach. So now the Gemara asks another question, right? Again, let it be overridden, but not just the first day, right? Kevan dekamafked la mirishon okma ashvi'i. Okay, so our answer to that question is, all right, okay, if we're going to choose one of the other days that it should override, we'll choose the 7th day, because the first day was the Yom Tov, so we'll choose the 7th day, which is also a Yom Tov in that case. That's why the Mishnah said that it overrides if the 7th day is Shabbat. Okay. Kevan dekam ifkat la mirishon okma ashvi'i. Since they removed it from the possibility of the first day, well, I'll settle it on the 7th. Ihachi. If that's the case, says the Gemara, ha'idna nami lidchi. Then today also we should say that it overrides Shabbat. And what's his answer? We've seen this answer before, right? Anan lo yadinan bekivua diyarcha. Right, the setting of the month. Inhu yade bekivua diyarcha. And if they know the right setting of the month, right? Lidche. So let it override Shabbat then. So what happens? Now we have an interesting side comment. I believe it's a side comment because it tells us why then in Eretz Yisrael they don't do it. Okay? Ki'ata Bar Hedya. When Bar Hedya came, this is what he said. All right? Namely the following. Lo ikla. Okay? That it doesn't I'm not sure how best to translate lo ikla. Hard Scroll wants to translate it as it never falls, but it never happens.
Never happened.
Okay, all right. In other words, that the 7th day of the holiday should come out on a Shabbos. Okay, but what happens? Ki ata Ravin v'chol nechute. When Ravin came and the others who are what we call jokingly the commuters back and forth from Eretz Bavel to Eretz Yisrael. Okay, back and forth. Amrei Ikle. They say it does happen. Velo, and they don't let it in Eretz Yisrael override Shabbat. Va'ala kasha. And therefore, this is problematic. Now, Ma Rav Yosef. Okay, as we continue, we're going to see now a back and forth between Rav Yosef and Abai. Okay, says Rav Yosef, Man lemelan the Arava benetila. Okay, who is it? Says Rav Yosef, right? That that the if we said that picking up the lulav is basically the equivalent of fulfilling the mitzvah, does that apply to the aravas as well? Okay. After all, for us, they're all bound together. We
Right.
assume that for them as well, right?
Aren't they making the case that there's a separate?
Well, that was one of the things that came to mind. Did they not bind them the same way that we bind them today? We know they have to be bound. In other words, it could.
Aren't we not talking about the aravas that were put up in the base of Mikdash? Not the aravas in the lieu of the aravas that were put up and what we still don't know what we actually did with them.
Right. Okay. So in other words, if they had, let's say, single aravas, and that was used in the base of Mikdash, okay. If you say picking up the mitzvah, maybe picking up the aravas for that purpose fulfills the mitzvah. We don't know. Okay. All right. So the Gemara raises the question.
What happened? What happened? Losing you. I'm losing you.
Okay.
No.
So that was fresh in my mind. Okay, so he said, 18, right?
Lost you. What's happening?
Yeah, there's a bad connection.
Uh-oh. Lost him on that one.
Yep.
I lost the voice.
My lulav benetila, arava benetila. Same thinking. The same way you take, grasp the lulav, shouldn't that be this parallel for the aravas? Okay, and the Gemara then says, Midday area. It's really comparable. Okay, Art Scroll translated is this a way of proof? But I happen to like Koren's translation a little bit better in this case. Ha kedeite, vaha kedeite. This one is this way. In other words, using the aravos with the lulav is one thing. The aravos used in the Beis Hamikdash is something else. That's how I understood it. So what happens? Eitive Abaye. Again, and notice Abaye side heck. Yom. They Hoshana Rabbah, okay, they would do it 7 times. Mai isn't the fall. What is it? Lav ba'arava. Isn't that mean that they use the arava? No, the lulav. No, he says they were talking about doing the lulav. V'ha'amar Rav Nachman, Nachman say in the name of Rav Ba'avu, following Ba'arava, that they went around with the Aravos. Amarle, he said to him, Hu Amarla Ba'arava, Va'ana Amina Belulav. He tells you that they went with the Aravas. I say they went around with the Lulavim. Okay. Notice again, simply the implication is just as we don't know for sure what they did.
How did he know for sure?
Apparently, they did
No.
not know for sure. And therefore, they were trying to either recollect or to try to determine. Okay. Itmar. Okay. So what happens? But it was said, Rabbi Eliezer says as follows, the lulav, that they used the lulav. Rav Shmuel Bar Natan, Amar Rabbi Chanina, in the name Ba'arava, that they used Aravas. V'chein Amar Rabbi Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba Ba'avuha Ba'arava. So notice again, this back and forth, that there was this difference of opinion.
When they talk about lulav, they talk about just the
Just the
central,
lulav, right?
not the.
Not the meaning altogether. That was my understanding too. Okay. Amar le Rava, says Rava, the Rav Yitzchak Bered the Rabba Bar Barhan, says to him, Bar Uriah, son of light. In other words, Torah scholar, son of a Torah scholar, is really what it means. Ta ve'ema lach milta ma'aliyata dahava amar avu. Come here and I'll tell you something, a great thing that your father once taught. Okay? Here it was taught in you. Kol hayom mekifin et mizbeach. Every day they would go around the altar one time. V'oto hayom mekifin et mizbeach sheva pamim. And that day they would go 7 times. Hachi amar avu. This is what your father said in the name of Rabbi Elazar, Belulav. It was referring to a lulav. Now what happens? The Gemara continues. Eitive. I'll challenge that with the following. Lulav dochet Shabbat b'tchilato. The lulav, okay? And now this, yeah, okay. A lulav overrides Shabbat at the beginning. That's implying when first day of Sukkot and Shabbos coincide. Va'arava bisofo, and Aravos dochet Shabbat in the last day, the 7th. Okay? Pam echat chal shvi'i shel Arava liod b'Shabbat. One time, right, that occurred on the day of okay, for the use of Aravos, I'm saying, occurred on Shabbos. Veheviu marbi os shel Arava me'erev Shabbat. And they brought branches. Okay, think of how we tie the Aravos together on Hoshana Rabbah. Maybe they just cut off a branch of the willow of the tree and brought it. Okay, and they brought it Erev Shabbos. V'hinichum ba'azara, and they left them in the by Tusim and the Bothesians. Remember, the Bothesians were like the Tzedukim. Okay, so keep that in mind. They did not accept the idea that the Aravos would go chet on the last day. Okay, so what did they do? V'natlum avshum tachet avanim. They took them and they hid the branches of Aravos under stones. Okay, remember, why is this slightly important for us? It helps us remember the flooring of the temple was flat stones. Okay, so they must have put that flooring, put it underneath. Okay, The next day, and the Am Haaretz. I'm going to translate Am Haaretz as the more common people. I didn't like the translation that I found that said ignoramuses. Okay. Well, that's right. The common people. They were the less educated.
Get the education.
That's all. But there's a difference between less educated, I think, and
Ignoramus.
right? Okay. So what did they do? They found Vishamtun, and they revealed them mitachet ha'avanim. The haKohanim, and the Kohanim brought them. V'zakfum b'tzidei hamizbech, and they set them up by the side of the altar. K'fi she'ein baitusin modim shechibut areva dochet haShabbat. Why? Because the baitusin don't acknowledge that the waving of the aravos is overriding Shabbos. Alma. Therefore, benetilah, that is simply an example of taking them. That's not it could be that they did not necessarily walk around with them, but they picked them up and they either stood them up or leaned them against the Mizbeah. Ve'ela nidchu, says the Gemara. But doesn't that seem to imply then that it overrides Shabbat in Eretz Yisrael, and that they should do likewise even now? Kevan da'anam lo dachinam, inhu nami lo dachu. Since we don't let it override Shabbat, they also don't let it override Shabbat.
There's a whole bunch that
Yes,
you
Hayom Tov Rishon,
and I
but what
remember on the salad making.
will it be done?
It really was.
We don't let it override Shabbat. V'lididhu dachei, but by them and the people in Eretz Israel do let it override.
Instead of Thanksgiving.
Gosh, I lost the something. He's gonna have to go over this whole thing because I don't follow this at all.
Okay, good.
On your agenda, yes. Isn't that beautiful?
Kenny gonna have to go over this because the reception wasn't very good. Hello, anybody there still?
I'm here.
He's gonna have
I
to
guess
go
it's
over this. This whole thing is gone.
Yep,
gonna
I
have to-
guess it's gone.
Now he's gonna have to go over this because I got
Yeah.
lost his list.
All right, have a good day.
It looks like it's time is up.
Yep. All the best.
Yeah, you too. Have a good one. Reception in the library isn't very good. I don't know where he is. Forget about it.
We took it in January. Is it 8 months now? Was